There's a category of substances out there that go beyond trippy visuals or psychedelic experiences. They don't show you new perspective. They replace it. You forget who you are, where you are, and sometimes you lose all sense of reality itself. Forever. These are called deliriants, substances that pull you into a waking nightmare, where nothing is as it seems. You won't see colorful patterns or meet the universe. Instead, you'll argue with people who aren't there, feel unseen eyes watching you from empty corners, and hear whispers from places you can't see. From over-the-counter pills that summon shadow people to ancient plants that erase your free will, this is the disturbing world of deliriants, where the line between reality and nightmare disappears. And before we get into it, please like and subscribe. Thank you. Before we get into the video, I have to preface this by saying that this video is for educational purposes only. I do not, in any way, condone the usage of any substances mentioned in the video. And you don't need to just take my word for it. By the end of the video, I'm sure you will be thoroughly convinced why not to come close to any of these substances. And also, while we are at it, let me explain what a deliriant truly is. A deliriant is unlike any other hallucinogens that cause vivid visual effects or heightened awareness. Deliriants disrupt normal brain function to produce intense confusion, memory loss, and hallucinations so realistic that users often can't tell them apart from reality. And that's what makes them so disturbing. It can break your sense of reality, and sometimes it can never be repaired. They act primarily by blocking acetylcholine receptors in the brain, leading to this dangerous and disorienting state known as delirium. And alright, now with all the warnings and explanations out of the way, let's get into the first substance. Datura. Datura is one of the most terrifying plants in the world, known for its long and troubling history, used in traditional medicine and rituals across cultures for centuries. Datura's terror lies in its ability to induce profound delirium, a state where reality itself becomes unrecognizable. Unlike psychedelics, which offer vivid but coherent hallucinations, Datura distorts the mind so deeply that users lose all sense of time, place, and identity. When consumed, Datura can cause extremely realistic hallucinations, but these are not the colorful or insightful visions associated with other substances. Instead, the experiences are frequently nightmarish, disorienting, and terrifying. People report complete memory loss for the duration of the trip, lasting anywhere from several hours to days. Users may find themselves confused, unable to distinguish between what's real and what's imagined, often interacting with hallucinations as if they were real. Physical symptoms like dry mouth, blurred vision, and severe agitation commonly accompany these mental effects. The danger of Datura is not only its intense psychological effects, but also in its narrow margin of safety. The active alkaloids, scopolamine, hyoscyamine, and atropine vary greatly in concentration, making dosage unpredictable and overdoses common. Stories of accidental poisonings and hospitalizations are widespread, with some cases resulting in long-term psychological trauma or even death. In many ways, Datura represents the darkest side of deliriants, an unpredictable, uncontrollable plunge into a distorted reality that few survive unscathed. And now let's get into a first-hand account from a user who survived a terrifying Datura experience, revealing just how real and frightening these trips can be. I lost my pets and almost burned the house down. I'm in my mid-30s and I've tried many different things in my time. LSD, mescaline, mushrooms, etc. I would call myself experienced with hallucinogenics, which were always fun for me, especially when I was younger. This experience was not one of those times. I must mention that I was trying to make a very light dose just to see what the effects would be. I did not intend to become incapacitated. Although I tried to document my experience exactly, I soon realized this would be an impossibility. Here's what I do know. 11 a.m. I boiled exactly 10 leaves about 6 to 8 inches long in 8 cups of water for 10 minutes. This was the first time with this plant, and I didn't want to overdo it. I took it off the burner and let it steep for a few minutes. As I was cooling off, I made a pitcher of a really sweet tea from concentrated dry tea mix. Then I filled 20-ounce glass with ice and filled the cup halfway with tea. I then filled the rest of the glass with the leaf brew. I ended up using only about 6 to 8 ounces of the brew. 11:30 a.m. I drank the tea all at once. It tasted quite nasty, even though it was heavily sweetened. It only took me a few minutes. I then removed the leaves from the pot, threw them away, and the pot with the remaining brew back on the stove. 11:45 a.m. I started to wonder if I had had enough and thought it was a good idea to make another glass. So I did, exactly as before, and drank it quickly as well. This time, I noticed it was a little hard to get it down though, almost like my throat was closing up, making it feel like I was choking. I started to walk back to the couch and realized I felt funny, like my body was drunk but my mind perfectly coherent. From this point on, I cannot tell you the exact timing of anything else because although I didn't realize it yet, I lost track of all time and reality. 12-ish, maybe. Oh shit, I'm totally wasted. I'm sitting on the couch and notice things are really strange. Corners of the walls turning into spiderwebs, very blurry vision. I was watching TV but realized I can't really see it anymore or understand what they're saying. I forgot to mention I was alone, for now my wife and daughter were due back late that afternoon. More on that later. I never intended to be this messed up, so I decided to get up off the couch and go to the bathroom. I realized then that it would take every effort, almost Herculean strength, just to get up off the couch. Finally, I got up off the couch and stumbled to the bathroom and caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Oh my god. The first thing I noticed was that my eyes were completely dilated. Then I looked down at my hands. I had a hard time focusing, but when I finally did, I realized they were beet red. I mean red. Worse than the worst sunburn you have ever seen. I looked back up at my face in the mirror, and I finally came into focus again. I realized my face looked the same. Now I'm freaking. My whole body was red from head to toe. I need to mention at this point that I still feel like I'm still there mentally. All I noticed were these physical problems. Completely dilated pupils, inability to focus, beet red skin. I decided that I had better try to puke up whatever I could, so I tried. Only a little came up, more like an acid reflux type thing. Except now I have a bigger problem. My throat is closing up. Breathing was difficult, and I had dry mouth like never before. No amount of water would satisfy, and every time I tried to drink it, felt like it was going to choke. I must mention that although I thought at the time my mind was still rational, I realized later that I was far from rational. Even still, I calmly, even though I felt like I was dying, went to my computer to look up websites to try to find out if there was a way to reverse the effects I was having. What stands out isn't just the hallucinations, but the inner self-doubt we can start to see emerge. And the user starts to realize, oh no, I'm in too deep. Somehow I made it to a site, I think, but then I realized I couldn't read it. Every word on the page was gibberish, it didn't make any sense. I knew the answer was somewhere, but I couldn't find it. Looking back, I estimate I spent hours on the computer staring blindly at the screen. At the time, I thought it was minutes. I went outside to smoke a cig and realized I couldn't see anything outside. It was way too bright, so I came back in quickly. I then thought of how fucked up I was and that I need to warn my daughter of the danger of this drug. She's 12. I went into her room and started to lecture her about the danger of drugs and to never try it and pick good friends and so on. I remember thinking how good she is being. She sat quietly and listened to me intently. When I thought I made my point, I got up to leave and realized she left the room. I was pissed. How could she just walk away like that? I went out in the living room to complain and realized she wasn't there. Nobody was there. I was still alone. I remember feeling at that point like I'm in trouble. What have I been doing? I must note that I still had all these symptoms I had earlier, the most troubling being I stumbled everywhere I went. My body was beet red still and choked every time I tried to drink something. I wondered how long it had been. I don't remember exactly what time it was when I looked, but I did realize it was a lot longer than I thought. I recall thinking my family would be home soon. I realized later I lost several hours doing what I don't know. Then they came home. All of a sudden, there she was, my wife, and boy did she look pissed. After what happened earlier though, I didn't believe it was actually her. This part of the story is now her recollection of what she came home to. She's a paramedic by the way too. She said she came home, opened the front door, and smoke came pouring out of the house. She ran to notice that the stove was on fire. There I was just standing there, looking off into space. She was screaming at me, "What the hell is wrong with you?" I remember saying nothing is wrong, but she says I was mumbling something about she needs to get off my back and go to bed. Then I saw my daughter running by and thought what was wrong with her. I didn't realize then, but she was scared shitless about what was going on. Then they left. Or had they even been there, I wondered. Oh, think I'll go have a smoke. Then what seemed like a few minutes, actually hours, they came back. We have pets by the way too. 3 dogs and a cat. When they came home the second time, all the animals were gone and the door was wide open. Now she's really pissed. She screams to me about almost burning the house down and now all the pets were gone. I told her she was nuts and to get off my back. Then they both left again. When basic cause and effect no longer applies, when loved ones might be real or imaginary, when time becomes unreliable, there is no way to orient oneself. It's not just fear or panic at play here. It's annihilation of self-context, and of course, the main subject of today's video, complete delirium. Damn, I thought. Were they even here? I spent the rest of the night on the computer, mostly just staring at the monitor. I woke up the next morning on the couch and had a talk with my wife. I still felt funny, but the worst was over. So, this is what really happened. My wife and daughter came home about 5:30 p.m. to find the stove on fire. She put out the fire. I must have taken the leaves out of the garbage and tried to make more tea. The stove was scorched. I think I drank more tea, but can't be certain. She drilled me about what was going on. She said I wouldn't tell her and kept telling her everything is cool. She asked me repeatedly what I was on, but I wouldn't tell her. She didn't realize I was as bad off as I was. She was more mad than anything. So she and my daughter took off and came back around 8:30 p.m. She found me on the computer and screamed this time, saying I lost the pets. I could go on and on with more details, but I don't want to miss the point. I could have burned to death in this house. I could have choked to death. Heart attack. Heart was racing too. I could have easily died. Those things didn't happen, but I will tell what did. It has been 2 months since this happened, and I'm still not the same. I hate to say it's permanent. I hope not. But truth is, I screwed myself up. My throat is partially closed. I have trouble breathing when I sleep. I cough up liquid sometimes because it tries to go down my windpipe. I still see shit that is not there. But worst of all is my brain. I can't maintain my thoughts. I'm a writer, but I can't focus anymore. It took me forever to write this. This conclusion brings up another terrifying fact of deliriants. They almost always leave you with long-term psychological damage that could take years to recover from, or in some cases, it will leave your brain damaged indefinitely. So it's just safe to say these substances are something you should not play with, and in the end, it's just not worth it. Salvia. Salvia isn't like any other psychoactive plant. It doesn't lure you in with vibrant visuals or profound insights. It literally rips you out of reality, often within seconds, and throws you into a dimension that has no rules, no logic, and no mercy. Traditionally used in Mazatec spiritual rituals, Salvia's active compound, salvinorin A, is one of the most potent naturally occurring hallucinogens in the world. But unlike LSD, Salvia doesn't create hallucinations. It transports you. The effects are near instantaneous. 1 second you're in your body, the next you've left it behind. Users often describe a complete ego death, becoming inanimate objects, or being folded into mechanical, geometric landscapes that feel infinite and inescapable. Salvia doesn't bend reality, it completely obliterates it. What makes Salvia especially disturbing is its brevity. Most trips just last a few minutes. But inside that small pocket of time, people often report experiencing entire lifetimes, feeling as though they've permanently crossed over into some alien realm. There's little joy in it, no spiritual awakening, just raw, unnerving disconnection. Physical symptoms include sweating, dizziness, and uncontrollable body movements, but the real danger lies in the psychological aftermath. Many users emerge shaken, some in tears, struggling to comprehend what the hell just happened. A common theme is the sense of not coming all the way back. People describe lasting feelings of derealization, as though the boundaries between the real world and the Salvia world never fully resealed. Next, we'll explore a first-hand account from someone who was pulled into the Salvia dimension and came back changed. Goodbye reality, goodbye universe. So I've been meaning to write this down for some time, but haven't had the time nor clear mind to do it. I had an experience on Salvia that was, is, and remains incomparable to anything I've ever experienced in my life, and it's still affecting me in a very big and negative way. I was pretty much new to smoking cannabis. I had done it multiple times in high school, but it's only been in the past couple months that I smoked it regularly, and by regularly, I mean approximately 3 times a week. At first, it was a sort of time-stretched feeling that I liked, and then it became more introspective, more self-examining experience, and I usually didn't like what I saw. Anyways, fast forward a couple more weeks, and I decided I wanted to try acid for the first time. Took 2 hits and had a great trip. Visuals weren't too crazy, but it was a mind for sure. Words started to lose their meanings, and musical phrases seemed just as a valid form of communication as a verbal phrase. Anyways, my buddy tells me he's got Salvia. I had heard of it, and at this point, I was really interested in trying any drug I could get my hands on. Essentially, my mindset was this: hey, I've done LSD, I can do any drug. The only drug I knew that would be stronger than acid was DMT. I knew all drugs created different reactions in different people, but I honestly didn't expect much from Salvia because 1, it was legal, and 2, everyone I knew who took it told me they thought it was like weed. Harmless enough, right? As I get to my friend's place, he tells me that he had a crazy dreamlike trip where he was hang gliding over Kansas or something that night before, and it scared him, so he didn't want to repeat. Hang gliding? Shit, I'll go hang gliding. And this brings up one common mistake made by people wanting to try Salvia. Many people think it's like LSD or think it's like mushrooms, which provides a more friendly trip. But in reality, the brain doesn't react to Salvia the same way. So many people get in over their head very quick. So he gives me the pipe, fills it with Salvia, lights it for me, and as I inhale, he tells me to breathe it in deep and hold. I do as I'm told and hold the smoke in for at least 15 to 20 seconds. Zeppelin's no quarter in the background. I'm ready to have a cool trip. Now let me interrupt for a second. I didn't know what extract it was. It really didn't matter in my mind. I guess what most people smoke is about 5x, 10x, or 20x. According to my friend, who got it from another friend, this was 90x. I know there's some debate about extract levels and potency, but this is all I know about the Salvia I personally smoked. Needless to say, I had no clue I was in store for a level 5 trip into another dimension. Then, out of nowhere, the second I exhaled, I felt like someone had punched me in the face. The air left my lungs, and I was in the most vulnerable state in my entire life. For some reason, the dark texture of the Salvia reminded me of poison, and suddenly I felt like I just smoked lead or something. Almost immediately, extremely venomous-looking kaleidoscope patterns filled most of my vision. They were fractal-shaped patterns that covered most of the vision. The only thing I could make out was my phone on the table. I struggled to breathe. I could hardly speak, but all I could muster was, "Get that out of here," as I pointed to the phone. Its LED screen shining through the fractal shapes. I think at that point, I didn't even know what a phone was, but for some reason, it needed to go. My friend took it and put it in the back room. When he returned, I was a soulless shell. I felt the most intense feeling of deja vu as all sense of self died. I had been here before. Now why the f would I ever return? The idea of taking this drug recreationally seemed as naive, foolish, and immature as anything you could ever imagine. It was like hell, honestly, in the sense that you could never imagine something so horrifying and evil that it really is ineffable. It's purely impossible to explain, but you're here and you're definitely experiencing it. There's nothing in this dimension to relate it to. Quite literally, there are no words to explain what I felt other than complete and utter despair and fear. Reality just broke apart and I was left in this fractal void. I couldn't speak. I couldn't feel any part of my body. Ideas broke down to the point where I couldn't think for myself. The images I was seeing were more intense than I could even register, so much so that the entire experience was sort of like sensory overload overdriven to the max. I guess my eyes were open and I was just sitting there with a stupid look on my face, but I was in a completely different dimension. I can remember a couple parts of this extremely confusing and disorienting experience, but like I said earlier, it's hard to put into words. My friend asked me something like, "You trippin'?" But it just kept skipping like, you, trippy. Suddenly, the words lost their meanings, and it became really sloppy sounding. The visuals skipped with it, and it was like everything in the room started to pull apart, and I started to see layers within everything. It was kind of like the cover of Pink Floyd's Yuma Guma, but everything was losing its detail and gaining new detail. The visuals were kind of like if you could imagine flying through an image or maybe traveling through two mirrors facing each other and just having the pattern of what you're seeing fall into itself and then reform and repeat. Now this sounds cool and all, but at this point, I had no clue I was under any kind of drug. I didn't know who I was or where I was. I just had this feeling, an extremely overwhelming feeling, that I had caused this disaster. I somehow did something extremely bad that caused the universe to collapse on itself. Now, this was an extremely personal experience, and I felt no connection to any other life forms at all. I was a prisoner in my own mind. I built reality in my own mind, and now I accidentally did something that just brought everything crashing down. It was a devastating solipsist experience. I remember the feeling that within the fractal, quickly evolving matrix was a choir of cartoon-esque objects created in the kaleidoscope pattern that were singing to me about the trip, ushering me in. I remember seeing twisted pictures of my friend's face, but nothing was disjunct or cut up like a film. It was all a fluid evolution from one thing to another, but it was so complex and overwhelming that my mind could not comprehend what I was seeing. Everything was alien. Nothing was real or even tangible. I could see it clearly, and yet it somehow was so intense, so bizarre, that it eluded my mind's ability to process it all. Oh, and all the while, I was listening to Zeppelin's The Ocean, playing in the background. But I didn't even remember it until weeks later under weed listening to the same record. I felt gravity's pull, but it was pulling me sideways. I felt an extremely strong tug downward, and this intensified as the trip became more and more intense. Suddenly, I felt like I couldn't grasp what I was seeing anymore. Not that I could before, but before I felt like I was a slave to the hallucinations. I couldn't think for myself. I couldn't reassure myself that I was on a drug. My mind was spent. Completely. I felt like a vegetable who couldn't even grasp what he was seeing. Now, my mind was trying to grasp it, but it couldn't. I felt my mind desperately trying to grab at ideas, but it couldn't quite reach. This inability to grasp the I trip, coupled with unbearable pins and needles and an extreme downward pull, started to create some sensation of self, but I felt like it was stretched out over the entire field of my vision. I had become the two-dimensional image of this warped and constantly moving alternate dimension. Suddenly, it began to fall apart and I felt like I was free-falling through this picture, while I was the picture. As my field of vision was warped and reassembling and being pulled apart, I felt my own body falling apart. Now, while this was all happening, I suppose I got up, started stumbling across the room, knocked a bunch of shit over, and then fell back and almost broke my friend's table. Needless to say, all the glass pieces were knocked on the floor, and I was stumbling around like some kind of village drunk in some old Irish novel. Suddenly, as I was fighting for my life, trying to climb out of the layers of reality that were falling around me, I saw my friend's girlfriend's face trying to hold me. Apparently, they were trying to subdue me for some time, but being that I was racing for my life in another dimension, falling to my death through millions of layers of reality, it was a little hard to get through to me. But the second I saw her face, I suddenly realized that I was human, that I had taken a drug, even that I was a sentient being. All that went out the window was just a little bit of some good old Salvia. My only instinct was to attempt to climb out of this racing, descending, swirling fractal picture. I was drenched in sweat to the point where my clothes were dripping. My heart was racing at 1,000 beats per minute, and I could hardly speak as my friends placed me in a chair, asking me what I saw. I told them to give me a minute to regain my composure. Much of the room was knocked over, but I was surprised the whole room wasn't completely destroyed, because I felt like I must have been clawing away at reality, desperately trying to escape from my personal hell. The only way I can honestly describe how I felt falling was down into the right. The three-dimensional world fell apart, and I could only perceive things in a two-dimensional light. Jesus Christ, my entire perception of reality was annihilated under the drug. The term ego death doesn't even begin to describe what I felt, but there was nothing to be gained from where I was. It was pure insanity to the nth degree. I had gone in expecting some kind of spiritual experience or something meaningful that I could come away with, but there was none of that in Salvia land. This was pure, unfiltered madness to a degree I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Alright, this is where I started having problems. Right when I came back from Salvia land, my friends let me lie down and watch a movie with them. I was shaking so hard. I just wanted to lay down and relax. They encouraged me to smoke a bowl. I felt like I was midway through an acid trip, and the weed just made it stronger. As we watched the film, I felt like the people on screen were really strange looking. I felt myself falling back into the Salvia, not in the sense that I saw visuals, but my mind was falling back into that strange place, and I could see in my mind's eye exactly what I hours earlier. The next couple hours I smoked weed were similar, intense flashbacks to Salvia, to the point where it truly disturbed me. Then one day, another friend smoked me out with some hash he smokes daily. I had acid-like thoughts and I had to backtrack just to realize I was in the room with him. Time to go, I thought, and went back to my car, but it was too strong to drive. I could barely talk thanks to the cottonmouth. I tried calling a friend, but could barely communicate. Since then, I've been getting stronger and stronger reactions to the weed. When I first started smoking after Salvia, first couple weeks, I would feel the Salvia sensation, extreme pins and needles, and I would feel like I'm being pulled downward. I could play with my depth perception, but sometimes if I stared at something too long, I got the sensation that there was no depth perception, that I was looking at a two-dimensional image that covered my entire field of vision, and then I could see little parts of the image moving and falling apart. Like a much less intense version of what went down in Salvia land. People's faces also seem to be hovering over their face. When I'm stoned around my friend who was my Salvia trip sitter, if I look him directly in the face, the rest of the room or my perception of everything in my peripheral creates this kind of tunnel effect that leads straight to his face. Another thing I think I remember feeling under Salvia, but I'm not quite sure I can remember. Pictures start to dance just like a low-level acid trip. Calling it strange is more than a colossal understatement. Weed has been taking me to a weird, twisted version of the normal world, something it never did before. When I'm sober, floaters and white specks really dominate my vision. It gets kind of distracting when I look up at the sky. The reason I'm putting this out there is because the day before yesterday was the worst. I felt anxiety and fear, unlike anything I've ever felt. I started to question my own reality. The way objects look on weed began to look extremely disturbing. People started looking disturbingly alien, as if it was the first time I'd ever laid eyes on a human before. I felt as if I was realizing something humans aren't supposed to realize. I was beginning to see things working behind the scenes, and it was frightening as hell. It's kind of like that splinter in your mind that reality isn't what you've always thought it to be, and now that you know the truth, it will haunt you forever. I have trouble even relating to my memories, my past, my identity, who I thought I was and who I wanted to be. For the first time in my life, I feel afraid. Of what? I have no idea. But it's this feeling. It's deep within me. I think I might have to stop all drugs for good if I ever want to feel normal again. It's depersonalization and derealization to a degree that really frightens me. I've never felt so alien. I never knew anyone could feel so alien and alone. I never felt so much emotion throughout my life. Never was afraid of much. Never cried over anything. Never was very emotionally attached to anybody or anything. But now I'm scared of something I can't even put into words. And I've broken down a couple times trying to explain it to people. Difficult experience is right. My biggest fear now is that when I'm not feeling this intense and overwhelming panic, I can't even relate to it in the slightest bit. And all that's on my mind is, hey, I feel fine. I'm ready to do some more drugs. This story isn't just about a drug trip. It's a glimpse into what happens when the mind starts to fall apart, when the thin veneer of reality starts to tear, and you're left staring into the void. Salvia is not a toy. It's a brutal, uncontrollable force that can strip away your identity, your memories, and your very existence. If you ever feel like you're ready for something like this, just try and remember this story. Because sometimes the scariest journeys aren't the ones you choose. They're the ones that take you completely out of yourself, with no guarantee you'll find your way back. Benadryl. If Salvia feels like being yanked out of your body and thrown into some cartoon nightmare where you never feel like yourself again, then Benadryl feels like slowly drowning in your own mind while spiders crawl onto you and people talk from under your bed. This one's different. This isn't some psychedelic kaleidoscope. This isn't cosmic insight or laughing with God. Benadryl doesn't open your third eye. It shuts it, locks the door, swallows the key, and then it traps you inside with everything you're afraid of. Literally. Why does it do that? Because Benadryl, or in the more medical term, diphenhydramine, is an anti-cholinergic. At high doses, it blocks acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter your brain uses to regulate memory, focus, perception, and even muscle control. So everything very important to the human body. When that system crashes, so does your grip on reality. You don't trip. You enter a psychotic, dreamlike state where the hallucinations feel completely real. You talk to people who don't exist, you forget how to read, you see insects, hear voices, and feel things crawling under your skin. And your brain just accepts it and thinks it's reality. But here's the real danger. High doses of Benadryl can cause lasting brain damage. Prolonged abuse or repeated overdoses have been linked to long-term cognitive decline, permanent memory loss, and even an increased risk of dementia. In fact, studies have shown that anticholinergic drugs like this, when misused, literally shrink parts of the brain associated with memory and critical thinking, like the hippocampus. It fries your wiring, slowly and sometimes permanently. And here's the worst part, it's completely legal. You can walk into a store right now and buy enough to completely destroy yourself. No ID, no locked case, no questions, just you, a box, and a decision that might ruin your life. People have died doing this. People have ended up in psych wards or worse, completely disconnected from reality forever. So if you're ever thinking about trying this, don't. This is your warning. It's not worth it. And if you don't want to take my word for it, then we can take someone else's word for it who's gone through this experience. And let's get into someone's experience with Benadryl. One very odd night. Time 0. Took 16 total pills, which is a total of 400 milligrams of diphenhydramine. Time plus 30, so probably around 12:30 a.m. Watching Family Guy with friends. Very relaxing. Hands and feet are feeling kind of heavy. Sounds slightly enhanced. I'm hearing the carbonated bubbles popping in the Pepsi can on my desk. Friends are leaving now. They will be back at noon tomorrow. Time, 12:50 a.m. Went to the bathroom, and out of nowhere, the green walls became blue. It was very odd because I didn't know what was happening at first. Hearing random sounds, i.e. clicks, beeps, music parts, people talking, birds chirping, more people talking. Moving has become very fluid and relaxing. Seeing more random things, like subtle little movement, out of the corners of my eyes. Time, 12:55 a.m. Vision has become more blurred, and my mind tends to wander off track hard to read and write. Some minor hallucinogens now. It nearly impossible to read. I can't are the same. Well, as you can probably tell, I was just a little messed up in the brain when I was trying to write this trip report, so I'm finishing the report now as I am sober and able to type. The time thing kind of got thrown out the window with this whole thing, so I will just explain everything as I can remember it on that night. Keep in mind, on the night of this trip, I was alone the entire time. After my failed attempt to write, I got off my chair and there was a little spider on the floor in my room. Same size as a normal spider. Not strange or anything out of the ordinary. I've become accustomed to spiders in my room from time to time, seeing as my room is in the basement right next to all of our storage stuff. I proceed to catching it in a tissue and flushing it down the toilet and continuing with my trip. While I was walking out of my bathroom, there were like 3 or 4 more on the ground outside my room. I really didn't think too much of it, except think that it was a little odd that randomly there were so many. I didn't think that the spiders were there, but decided not to waste my time killing any of them. I sat in my room feeling very pleasant, watching more Family Guy and just trying to be in a calm state of my mind. I was thirsty, so I decided to venture out of my room into the fridge not 15 feet from my room in the storage room. I opened my door and looked down to see the same spiders as before, building a little web in the corner of the wall. And then I saw something on the floor. It was almost the same shade as my carpet, kind of a light tan/whitish color. I bent down to look more closely, and I'm trying to focus the best I can, and all of a sudden, my vision wasn't blurry anymore, and I saw what was on the floor. It was a f***ing scorpion, and a big-ass one too. I really had no time to respond to this because right then I see someone run down the stairs and go to the piano and start playing it. It seems like it was my brother, but at this time of night? Following him was my dad. Walking slower, he said, "Hey, turn the piano off and come back upstairs, I'll tuck you in." I was relieved to see his face. Talking the best I could, I explained to him that we have a really bad spider infestation and that I found a scorpion on the floor. He just stood there, looking off towards the pool table, not saying anything. I said a little louder, "Dad," and then I repeated what I had just said a little louder than I did before. I was really confused now. I was wondering why he wouldn't respond back to me. He then walked around towards the pool table and out of my immediate sight. I followed him to see if he was alright, but there was nothing. Not a single person in the entire basement. Trust me, I searched. I went back to my room and then remembered what I went to do originally, get a drink. Not remembering that the scorpion was on the ground outside my room, I looked back at the spiders making their web and tried to find a clear path that wouldn't disturb them. Right then, I saw the big-ass scorpion again. I forgot about it temporarily, but there it was, pincers out and sail up, ready to sting. I'm not a pussy or anything, but this scared the shit out of me. I jumped over it nervously and continued to get a drink, and I kept seeing the same strange color difference in different areas on my basement carpet. I ignored it at first, carefully watching my step, trying not to step on these scorpions to get stung. I got my drink, but I didn't end up in my room for like 2 more hours. I was at this point sweating profusely. Me not ever doing any hallucinations before, and even worse doing it alone on a Friday night. I went into my bar and grabbed every glass cup, mug I could get. At this point, I didn't know what reality was and what was just the hallucinogens, and that really is not a good thing. I was freaking out, having the worst trip of my life. I proceeded in carefully crawling around the floor and capturing every single scorpion I could find in my basement so that I could be safe and able to go to sleep at ease. In total, I put down maybe 50 to 75 glasses around my entire basement. Now, for a moment, just imagine being so deep in a hallucination that you're playing pest control with nothing. Like, this guy is here on his hands and knees, battling shadow creatures with paper cups. And the scariest part, he's convinced it's completely real. That's the terror of deliriants. There's no trip, so to say, just full-on insanity. As I'm laying down one of the cups, I look up and there was this girl standing by my couch. So, not knowing this person, I was like, "Who the hell are you? And why are you in my house?" She calmly replied that she was friends with my friend Andy, and they were both just stopping by to say hi. She also said she drove him. At this time, it was about 2:30 a.m., and I'm straight pissed now. I'd pretty much forgotten about the damn scorpions. Andy has been known to do dumb and very inconsiderate things, but this crossed the line. I found Andy standing in my game room by the air hockey table in all my brother's dress clothes. I was like, "Dude, why did you come over? It's like 2 a.m. and you can't be here. My parents will hear you two and will ground my ass. So you need to leave this second. I'm not fucking kidding anymore." I then realized that I was shouting and that my parents might hear me, so I quieted myself down and walked back into my basement area. The strange girl was still there, and I kept pleading to her that they needed to leave right now, or we would all be in trouble. She wouldn't respond to me. I went in closer to tap her to get her attention, but just then she disappeared. I was like, what the is going on here? Right as I see Andy walking over towards my pool table, and just as I went to tap him, he disappeared too. I was so confused and scared, all in the same time. I shook my head and tried to make sense of all of this, and then I saw this mysterious chick again, in the same place as before. She told me that they would be leaving in like 15 minutes, and that they were sorry about coming over. I thanked her and tried to explain the weird shit that was happening. I showed her all the glasses and cups and told her that there were a bunch of very well camouflaged scorpions on my carpet, and I've been trying to catch them so I wouldn't get stung. I told her that there may be more, so look out and be very careful. I was sort of calming down. I was still very carefully watching every single step I took on my basement carpet. I went to watch TV, but I couldn't focus on the TV for some strange reason. I was getting kind of cold, so I went to get a blanket to wrap up with, but ended up getting a towel from the bathroom and still being cold. I think at this time I turned on the light to the stairs and started up the stairs. I stopped about halfway up and realized that this was not a good idea to go upstairs like this. Unfortunately, I was way too up to care. I was hunting scorpions, and they made their way to the entryway. I was determined to stop them, but ended up going back downstairs. I walked back down and stood at the last step of the stairs and sat down trying to make sense of this night and make an attempt to calm down. When I sat down, I saw Steve next to me at the end of the stairs. I started talking to him and telling him that I was having a really bad trip and I need him to talk to me. I looked up and it turns out that I was talking to a blanket that was draped over the railing. I got up quickly and grabbed the blanket and threw it on the floor and used it kind of like a safe walkway from the stairs to about halfway to the dorm to my room and about to the door of my bathroom. I walked on the blanket and jumped into the bathroom. I was now in a safe place to think. I was looking at the spiders from earlier making their webs. It was now a picture-perfect, round spiderweb with a brown reclusive spider in the center of it. It is poisonous, and I avoided any contact with it. Next, I was carefully examining the big 3 to 4 inch long camouflage scorpion that was now under clear glass so he couldn't sting me. I would tap the glass and he would put out his pincers and raise his tail ready to attack. It was quite frightening. Right then, I noticed that Steve was standing behind me, pointing to the darkness in the storage room. I asked him what he was looking at, and he said that I could see it if I looked close enough. Sure enough, there was a bird, a pigeon to be exact, standing in the room looking at me with its little beady eyes, moving its head around. I felt as if he could read my mind and my thoughts. I turned around to tell Steve that I saw the bird and there was nobody there. I was again seeing and having conversations with people that were not there. I went into my room looking for anything to comfort me, but the only thing I could think was the fact that there were no spiders or scorpions in my room as of yet. I look over and Andy is sitting at my computer in my chair. I didn't even know what to say to him. I figured that they left at least an hour ago since I didn't see them anywhere. To make it even worse, that girl that he was with was lying in my bed sleeping. I tried everything to get them to leave, but nothing. I would ask him things, but he wouldn't respond back to me, just silence. I would go to tap the girl, and she would disappear and then reappear when I was further away. This was getting increasingly frustrating, and even more, I was losing it. I was on the verge of a mental breakdown. I was seriously about to start crying. Then, there was nothing. I don't recall what happened from there until just before the end of my trip. The next thing that I remembered was walking down the stairs from the second floor of my house with my dad next to me talking and stuff. I kept saying the best I could that I had a nightmare and I was really hot. I was drenched in sweat and I mean soaked. He got me some ice water and went back to the basement in my room where I apparently went to sleep. I figured that it was just another one of my hallucinations. Next morning, my dad wakes me up at 10:30 telling me that he was going to one of my brother's school things. He asked me if I remembered what happened last night. Of course, I responded with a, "What do you mean?" I knew what I did that night, from 10 p.m. to about 6:30 a.m., and the rest I figured I just slept and dreamt that part about talking with my dad while I was tripping. Here's what really happened. I personally do not remember any of this. My dad told me it all. I ended up walking upstairs again, but not going back down like before. I ended up going all the way up to the stairs where my brother's and my parents' bedrooms were. I ended up standing right next to my parents' bed on my dad's side, not saying anything, just standing there. He said that we had a conversation that went something like this. "What are you doing up here?" "Nothing." "Is everything okay?" "Yeah." "What do you want?" "Nothing." He then brought me back to the kitchen and gave me a cold glass of water and asked me again if everything was okay. I replied yes, but I had a really bad nightmare and he noticed that I was soaked with sweat. He said that we sat in the kitchen and talked for another 5 minutes. Then he said I went downstairs and went to sleep. He figured that I was sleepwalking because I had done similar things in the past. So it turns out that I wasn't hallucinating talking to my dad tripping out. That's really strange because I wasn't nervous at all talking to him. Just played it cool and I'm in the clear. And that's the thing about deliriants. They don't send you on a trip. They just take you. There's no music, no colors, no blissful floating. It's not like acid or shrooms where you know what's real and you know what's not real. With this stuff, everything feels completely real. And it just wasn't fun at all. It was just terrifying, isolating, and absolutely chaotic. If there's a moral here, it's this. Not all drugs make you feel good. Some drag you into the deep end of your own brain and leave you there to drown. So yeah, next time you're curious about trying something wild, maybe just talk to a blanket sober. It's safer. Nutmeg. Yeah, that stuff in your kitchen cabinet. The thing your grandma puts in cookies, the spice in eggnog, but take enough of it and it turns into something else entirely. Nutmeg doesn't just get you high. It drags you through a swamp of time distortion, paranoia, nausea, and full-body dread. The trip, it isn't magical, it's miserable. Your body feels poisoned because it is. Your mind warps, hours feel like years, your limbs go numb, you start seeing things that aren't there, and questioning if you are. So why does this happen? Nutmeg contains a compound called myristicin, a naturally occurring chemical that, in high doses, acts as a deliriant hallucinogen. It messes with your central nervous system, altering neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, but also your body's genetic system, which regulates heart rate and stress responses. That's why people on nutmeg often report panic attacks, disassociation, visual hallucinations, and extreme anxiety, sometimes lasting 2 to 3 days. But there's more. When abused, nutmeg can be a neurotoxic. That means it can actually cause brain damage, especially in large or repeated doses. We're talking cognitive decline, memory issues, tremors, and sometimes long-lasting damage to the liver or kidneys. And you don't need to do it 100 times. Some people report serious health consequences after just one massive dose. It's also unpredictable, similar to Datura. Everyone reacts differently. One person might feel weird for 12 hours, another might spend 72 hours in full psychosis, unable to tell dream from reality. But hey, it's legal. You could walk into your kitchen right now and take enough to derail your mind and possibly your entire life. Don't. This isn't some herbal hack. This isn't spiritual. This is literally toxic. And it's a hell you climb into on your own with no one around to pull you back out. So if you're curious, stay curious. Don't be the next person trapped inside a 3-day panic attack alone, hallucinating your own funeral. Because now we're going to hear from someone who did it, and what they saw on the other side was anything but normal. Nutmeg, a hidden reality. I have used nutmeg around 5 to 6 times. The most important things I learned to remember. 1. Never have anything important to do. 2. Never be around people that I don't like. 3. Have 3 to 5 days of rest. 4. Drink lots of water, not pop, before, during, and after. This tends to get rid of the side effects. This is an account of my most memorable and recent trip. Noon. Ingest nutmeg. 1. No effects yet, like expected. 2. Mild pot-like buzz. 3. Things get interesting. At times, nutmeg feels like acid, pot, and MDMA. Acid-like pattern form. Short-term memory is non-existent. My body feels lightweight and heavy at the same time. Things that are cold or warm to the touch feel strange. Sometimes it is hard to tell the difference between cold and warm things. 7. My friend and I decided to go see Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It is difficult to concentrate on the movie. I decided that I shouldn't have gone to a public place. I needed to go pee, but was afraid that I'd get lost and go into the wrong theater. Eventually, I got the courage to go to the bathroom. Upon returning, I watched the rest of the movie, and the fight scenes looked and sounded cool. All of the characters in the movie were moving in slow motion at times that it would have not made sense for the effect to be there. 10. I was frozen in a euphoric state, unable to move. I've never done heroin, but this is what I guessed it would feel like. Sounds were very loud. Visually, there were few effects unless I meditated. I had a feeling of grandeur throughout the rest of the trip. I felt like I was the king of the room I was in, and my pets were my servants. My lizard, which is a bearded dragon, was my bodyguard. 2 days later, my mind was gone until a few days afterward. I enjoyed the trip. This is a definite boredom drug. If you're bored and have the time, go ahead and do it. I do not recommend doing this drug if you are not experienced in chemicals. Peace. This was not a spiritual awakening. That was a man naming his lizard a bodyguard and watching a kung fu movie in a dimension that didn't make sense. And here's the scary part. He seemed to like it. And that's the trap with nutmeg. It doesn't slam you into a wall like acid or DMT. It seeps in slowly, crawling under your skin until you don't know if you're high or just broken. Some nutmeg turned this guy into euphoric monarch hallucinating pet hierarchies and loud soundscapes, and then he disappeared for 2 full days. His mind vanished, and he's lucky it came back. But what if it didn't? What if the next trip doesn't let go? Because nutmeg can do that. And that's the thing about all these substances we're covering. It's not about chasing fun. For a lot of people, it's about chasing anything. A distraction, a chemical escape from boredom, pain, curiosity, or just the silence. And with that, let's dive into a story that takes the opposite turn. A trip that doesn't end in euphoria, but in paranoia, isolation, and something far darker. Because the next one, they didn't come back the same. Trance dream scenery and going through hell. I was a junior in college when a cool guy came to visit one weekend. He inquired if we had any dope, but we didn't. So he suggested we go get some at a grocery store. 3 of us went there with them and came back with 3 containers of ground mace. He explained that this substance is prepared from the arlis that grows around the outside of the nutmeg seed, and assured us it is a powerful psychedelic. Back in our dorm, each of us took a lot of the stuff with perhaps 6 ounces of water. Nothing happened to me at first, but after half an hour, I started to feel a bit dizzy. It occurred to me it would be nice to have some music to accompany the anticipated trip. I didn't have any music equipment, so I locked myself in the room of another friend who had a record player and was away for the weekend, and started up some of his Spanish-American music. Lying on his bed, my trip started off with abstractions moving across my occipitals. These technicolor patterns moved with the highly rhythmic Mexican music, stimulated me to respond with rhythmic movements of my own as I lay prone on the bed. At some point, these gyrations got me aroused, and I consummated that state with a As this approached culmination, my occipitals responded, reflecting what my body was doing, and then the imaginary broke off to nothingness as I relaxed. Instead of eventually returning to consciousness, a trance-like state ensued in which I was no longer observing the trip from my usual perspective, but instead was immersed in a dream. This was not like a lucid dream at all. It was like being the character I was dreaming about. Starting out as an infant, I gradually developed into a toddler without having any reflective thoughts about who I was or where I was. Up to this point, the trance had lasted 4 or 5 hours. Objective time, through my subjective dream time, seemed indefinitely longer. Then, as my dream perspective reached the age when personal memories had begun to form in my actual childhood, at around age 3 or 4, it occurred to me in the trance that I recognized my surroundings. In fact, the trance dream scenery was the interior of the house I lived in when I was that age. This broke the continuity of the experience, and from that point on, for perhaps another hour, I dreamed an increasingly speeding up montage of short sequences, capturing scenes from my childhood and teenage years up to my actual age, which was 20 at the time. Once back in real-life perspective, I got up and walked around for a while, went to the hall bathroom and vomited, and then lay down again, feeling awful. My body seemed to dry out like a desert. Eventually, it was like a sandman with strands of glass running through me, replacing the physiology of my nervous system. I began to jerk and twitch. Luckily, my friend Rory came to my rescue. He gave me artificial respiration, staying with me for at least an hour. Even so, it was like going through hell. Eventually, possibly thanks to Rory, I survived, never to take mace again. I think the down part of the trip took almost as long as the up part, all told about 12 hours. But the experience taught me that Alexander Shulgin's well-known quote is true. I understood that our entire universe is contained in the mind and the spirit. We may choose not to find access to it. We may even deny its existence. But it is indeed there inside us, and there are chemicals that can catalyze its availability. When limited to one's personal perspective, that entire universe is that person's entire life experience. This trip retrieved the initial part of my life that happened before I could remember anything, and also many scenes after that, which I could remember and recognize as the trance state proceeded post-toddlerdom. All that came rolling across my occipitals. Did anything like my experience happen to my 2 friends who took a similar amount of mace? No. They got buzzy and eventually slept it off. And as we wrap up this exploration into substances that bend and break your reality, it's clear that the line between curiosity and danger is razor thin. From eerie hallucinations to moments of unexpected peace, these experiences show us just how fragile our minds can be under chemical influence. So, before you decide to experiment, remember, these aren't just stories or myths. They're real, with real consequences. And the question remains, is the price of altered reality ever worth paying? Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.